Cameron here at Soren Law, and today we're going to be talking about June Medical Services v. Russo, recent United States Supreme Court decision, which was decided June 29th, 2020. Now, in order to understand this case, we've got to go back to 1992, where the United States Supreme Court decided Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Now, this is a very important decision because essentially what it did is it affirmed the central principle of Roe v. Wade, that is, a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy before viability, but at the same time completely changed the test for evaluating government regulations that affect abortions. This new test, this so-called undue burden test, asks the question, does the state regulation have the purpose or effect of placing a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman seeking an abortion of a non-viable fetus? That's a bit of a mouthful, and I'm sure that your first question is, what constitutes a substantial obstacle? Great question. The Supreme Court's been working on that one for the previous 3 decades. Now, we've got that particular one. Shelve that to the side because we'll be coming back to it. In 2013, the state of Texas passes a law, and essentially what it says is all physicians who perform abortions must have admitting privileges at a hospital within 30 miles of their facility. Initially, this doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but as it turns out, getting these admitting privileges is actually quite difficult. And the ultimate result of that Texas law was that the number of facilities providing abortions got cut in half. So it actually had a pretty big effect. So, 2016, the Supreme Court has this case, Women's Whole Health, in front of it, where they're looking at this Texas law and going to decide its constitutionality. And ultimately, in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court says this creates a substantial obstacle, so ultimately we're going to strike it down. Important to note here is that in the dissent was Chief Justice John Roberts. Fast forward 4 more years, and now we get to our current case, June Medical Services v. Russo. Now, essentially, the state of Louisiana passed an identical law to that of Texas that they had done in 2013. Essentially, if you're a physician performing abortions, you have to have admitted privileges at a hospital within 30 miles of your facility. Okay, so now we've got a slightly different composition of the court. What's the result? Well, essentially we got a 4-1-4 decision. We have 4 liberal justices articulating essentially the same reasons in Women's Whole Health as to why the law should be struck down. We have 4 conservative justices articulating similar reasons in Women's Whole Health on why it should be upheld. And then we have Chief Justice John Roberts. And he says, well, I think Women's Whole Health was decided incorrectly and still do. But it is the law of this court at this point, and I have no extra compelling reason to overturn that case. Therefore, I'll apply it, and this law is struck down. Okay, that's kind of interesting. What's going on here is Chief Justice John Roberts is applying the principle known as stare decisis. The literal translation would go something to the effect of, let stand that which has been decided. And it's essentially the court's fidelity to precedents, its adherence to precedents. Now, if stare decisis is to have any meaning, it is you have to have an extra reason other than the case was wrongly decided to overturn it. What are those types of reasons? Well, they tend to be subsequent factual and legal developments, and also to a certain extent, administratability. That is, the law decided in that previous case, or that task articulated in that previous case, it's not really workable anymore, or we've had years of experience demonstrating it's not terribly workable, so we need to come up with a new one. Okay. So, Roberts is applying stare decisis. And that ultimately has a very large effect. What he's essentially saying here is that the public's faith in the United States Supreme Court as an institution, that is, the faith that they're not just going to flip-flop, that they're going to apply the law, be good and faithful judges, that's more important to Roberts than his own legal opinion. That's a pretty strong message right there, because not all judges are like that. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for example, or Justice Clarence Thomas, both good judges, trying to do the best they can. If they've got a case that they think is wrongly decided, they're sticking to their guns. Roberts here is saying, I'm going to stick with stare decisis. I thought it was wrongly decided, but it's the law of the court, and therefore I'm going to apply it. The reason why this case is, I think, quite important is that it sends the message to numerous litigants throughout the country that, yes, we may have 5 conservative justices on this court, but that does not mean we are going to start overturning decisions that were made 5, 10, 15 years ago, at least if Roberts continues to apply the rationale, the principle he did in this case. Essentially, if that case, I mean, you're telling me it was wrongly decided, but you have given me no other additional extra reason beyond that, I'm not going to overturn it. And so that's something that one should be on the lookout for in the subsequent terms, is whether Roberts is going to continue to adhere to it. Now, I'm going to make a prediction and say I think he will, and I think that's going to have a lasting impact in terms of how the public continues to perceive the United States Supreme Court. I think it's going to help improve it. As always, I hope you found this video enjoyable and informative. Thank you.